Hey, it's Marley, aka Type 1 Reader, and welcome to my September reading wrap-up. So today I'm going to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of September. It wasn't my best reading month, spoiler alert, but we have a few good ones in here. So let's just talk about the stats first, and then we can get into the individual book reviews. So I read 7 books this month. I averaged about 8, so it was a little bit less than usual. That was about 2,521 pages. My average rating was 3.79, so kind of a good rating. Books acquired was only 1. And then in terms of genre, it was a little bit of a mix this month, which is nice to see. We had 2 contemporary and 2 romance, and then 1 fantasy, 1 mystery, and 1 nonfiction, which is rare. In terms of the physical to ebook breakdown, 71.4 of the books I read were ebooks, and then only 28.6% were physical, so 5 to 2. Then for the audience, I read 4 adult books and only 3 YA books. For author gender, I read from 6 female authors and only 1 male author, which is pretty typical for me. In terms of author status, it was pretty equal, where I had read from 4 of the authors before, I had read from 3 of the authors before, and 4 of them were actually new authors for me. And then in terms of year published, I mainly read from this year, actually, 2024. 3 of the books I read were released this year. 2 were from 2023, then 1 from 2021, and 1 from 2014. Okay, now let's get into the individual reviews, and we will go in order of my least favorite to my most favorite. Starting out with Bad Therapy by Abigail Shrier. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Not a horrible rating by any means, just wasn't the most enjoyable for me. This is a nonfiction book about how therapy is not helping the kids grow up, as the title says. Obviously, it does make a disclaimer that therapy can be helpful for certain people and certain children that have, really bad trauma or mental health issues, but it speaks more about how the average kid who isn't that traumatized is getting too much therapy these days, too much, medication, and kind of coddling is the word that I would use, instead of actually teaching kids to grow up, handle their problems, and move on from them. It's teaching kids to really dwell in their feelings. And this was an interesting read for sure, and one I would overall recommend people read. I think some people really don't agree with this take, and to those people I would say try out reading this book and seeing a different opinion. And I think some people might already be on the same page as what this book is trying to say. There were just certain things I didn't love about how the author wrote this. There were times where she was using these specific examples and it was getting a little bit redundant for me. I was like, okay, she was using examples of certain surveys kind of that kids are given, and she just kept using examples of these surveys that kids were having to take, and it's we get it, they're being asked inappropriate questions. Or at some point she made about schools. I just couldn't personally relate to it because I don't work in a school or have any kids who are in school, so some of it I felt a little bit removed from. I couldn't quite believe some of the things she was saying, and I feel maybe it was only certain schools that have these types of things she was talking about, like therapists in school and stuff like that. Still really interesting. I definitely agree with what she's saying overall in this book. So I would recommend this if you want a nonfiction book. Another book I read this month was the 4th volume in the Fullmetal Alchemist series. I've been really enjoying this series. I think I rated every other volume before this one a 4-star or something. I ended up rating this 3.5, so a little bit lower, just because this one was very much only focused on learning about the brothers' past. Because if you don't know, this is about 2 brothers who are alchemists, and when they were younger, they tried to resurrect their mother and it went wrong. And so that's why it's called Fullmetal Alchemist, is because now they have lost either all of their body parts or some of their body parts, and they're now made of metal. So they are trying to get their bodies back throughout the series. But in this one, we literally were just seeing flashbacks to stuff we had already kind of learned about or been alluded to. So I didn't think it gave anything really new or overly interesting, and I feel it wasn't as funny as the other volumes have been. So still enjoying this series, but I just think this was my least favorite volume so far. Another book I ended up rating 3.5 stars is Begin Again by Emma Lord. Emma Lord is like a YA contemporary author. I've read a few of her books now and quite enjoyed them. This one I also did enjoy, but there were just certain things that were irking me. The plot of this one is that we have the main character whose name is Andy, and she's in college, but she ends up switching schools because she didn't get into her dream school right away. She had to go to this other school for her first semester, but now she has been able to transfer into her dream school, which is where her mother went, and her mother has since passed away, so she wants to go there to really feel that connection to her mother. Also, it works out for her because her boyfriend also goes to this university, and it's been hard for them to have this long distance. But then she gets there and finds out her boyfriend actually transferred to her school to be close to her. So it's not the most ideal situation. We're basically seeing her adapt to the new school. She's kind of struggling to keep up with her studies when she has all of these other things on her plate. We're seeing her bond with friends. We're seeing her have a different romance and just a typical kind of coming of age story. I like that it was set in college instead of high school. Just having the characters aged up a little bit was nice. This type of character though, Andy, one of the things that was bothering me and taking me out of the story is the fact that she refuses to swear. She's like a very kind of innocent, naive girl, and she doesn't like to swear, which is fine. I'm not a big swearing person either, but she'll replace swear words with other words. And instead of it just being like, oh, rats, or like, you know, a one word substitution, she'll say like a whole phrase. And it really was throwing me off because it just made no sense to me. I think closer to the beginning of the book when I wasn't used to it, like she literally just said cheese and crackers. And I was so confused as to why she was saying cheese and crackers in the middle of a conversation she was having. And then I realized, oh, like it was supposed to be read like cheese and crackers, like darn. And I was like, that's just so dumb. Like who would say full-on phrases of food as a swear word? Like swear words are supposed to be like quick kind of one word words normally, not like a whole freaking sentence. And that happened throughout the book. That continued to happen. She would list her favorite foods and they would be full-on sentences, and I'm just like, this is so dumb. But other than that, I mean, it was cute. I think it maybe dragged a little bit long for me, but overall pretty cute story. Okay, then I also read XOXO by Axie Oh, and I apologize, I really thought her name was Ali Oh when I had read it before, and I think I've said Ali Oh a few times. I read this in my reading blog for the month where I read books recommended to me by coworkers. That's also why I read Bad Therapy as well. I can link that blog below in case you missed it. But this was a really cute, again, young adult contemporary romance book about our main character who one day meets this boy at her uncle's karaoke shop, and they have this really nice night together, but then he ends up having to go back to Korea. Next thing we know, she ends up going to school in Korea and meeting him again there, and she finds out he is a K-pop idol. But she's not really into K-pop, so she hadn't recognized him or anything. So now she's adjusting to going to school in Korea, meeting new friends and stuff like that, and focusing on her own like studies and practicing her musical ability while also having this whirlwind romance with this K-pop idol. I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was really cute and sweet. I think I shouldn't read YA contemporary books like this too much though. I think, you know, a little dose of it here and then is good, but the fact that I read 2 of them this month maybe was a bit much. But it is really cute, especially for anyone who's really into K-pop, which is not me, but it was still interesting to learn more about that culture that I don't really consume that type of media normally, but I would definitely recommend for anyone who's a fan of K-pop or Korean dramas. I think this would really work for you. Just know that it is a teen character though, like it is young adult, so just be prepared for that. Another book I ended up giving 4 stars was My Husband. This is by Ventura. This was quite a unique novel, and it's a quick read as well if you're wondering. But we have a main character who I believe stays unnamed throughout the book, but she is just like obsessed with her husband. And that is the whole story. It's just kind of her inner monologue, talking about her husband, her day-to-day, what she does to keep him in love with her, keep him like infatuated with her, because she is completely infatuated with him, and just her only thoughts are of him. Basically, she doesn't really care that much about her kids or other things. She's just obsessed with her husband. It's a bit of a darker story. It's kind of ominous because you're like, what is this leading up to? What is this building up to? And ultimately there was, you know, a bit of a twist or a payoff at the end. I still don't think it was like my favorite book though. So that's why I didn't give it like a 5 star or anything, but I still think it was a unique, interesting book that kept you thinking, kept you questioning, like, what is going on with this girl? Is she mentally ill? Like, what's going on with the husband? So yeah, it was interesting. One of my favorite books I read this month was the Rom-Commers by Katherine. This is a romance, or a rom-com actually. I read The Bodyguard by Katherine before, and it's one of my favorite romances I've ever read, so I had to give her another chance. This one was not quite as good, but I still just really love her writing, so I still would recommend this if you enjoyed The Bodyguard, even though it's not quite on that tier. But this has a main character who is a writer, or like an author. Her life has been kind of held back because years ago her family was in an accident where her mother passed away, and her dad is severely like injured and remains quite like disabled and ill, so she just kind of takes care of him and is always home to take care of him. But then she gets this opportunity to go to LA to co-write a script with her favorite script writer. Oh yeah, I guess she writes scripts, not books. Yeah, sorry. So her sister just finished college, so her sister's like, I'll take care of dad, you go do this. It's really hard for her to get out of her shell and get out of her routine, but she does go to LA and starts co-writing the script with the man that she idolizes. But the thing is, he didn't know that she was coming, and he's like pissed about it. He doesn't want to write with her. He ends up agreeing in the end, as you can imagine, but there is this sort of like butting of heads, clashing of personalities going on at the beginning, which I love. It's, you know, classic kind of enemies to lovers, getting off on the wrong foot kind of thing. Writing is so funny. The thing is, this book does deal with a lot of like serious topics that I feel like she could have toned down a little bit in terms of what our main characters went going through and her family, and then what the main guy is going through. Sorry, I'm not remembering their names. I don't know, I just feel like it had potential to be as good as The Bodyguard, but she just made it a little bit too like serious and like bogged down, and I wish it could have been like a little more lighthearted. That being said, still really loved it. Definitely a potential favorite romance author from her. I'm going to keep reading her stuff, so definitely one that I would recommend, but just kind of be aware, like, there are some serious topics going on there. But it also features the characters from The Bodyguard, which is cool that she is creating this kind of little universe where her characters do interact. And then my favorite book of the month, my highest rated book, was All the Colors of the Dark by Whitaker. This is actually my book club book that I have with my friends. It wasn't recommended by me. Normally I'm the one recommending the books, but I'll admit I was a little hesitant for this book because it's a little bit different than what I typically read and what we typically read in the book club, but I'm really glad that we read it because I give it 4.5 stars. Basically, this is a bit genre bending. Like, it's sold as like it's a mystery thriller, also a romance, also historical. It just is, and it's a bit long. Like, to include all of these elements, it is a bit of a longer book, which I found daunting at first, and it definitely drags at times, but by the end it's so worth it. And for the last third, like, I could not put it down. But I should probably say the plot. We're following mainly these two characters, Saint and Patch. Since they're kids, they're really close friends as kids because they're both kind of outcasts, and then there are these girls being abducted in the town, and Patch, while he's saving one of the girls, he ends up getting abducted. Saint is trying to find him. Basically, it ends up being over many years. We see these characters all the way until they're adults, and there's this mystery throughout of who kind of was abducting the girls and where are they, and Patch dealing with the fact that he, you know, was abducted, and Saint, there's like unrequited love, there's a true love within it. I don't want to give everything away, but it's such a good story. It's so character centric, which was different for me because most mystery thrillers are not that focused on the characters, right? It's more focused on the plot and the twists. But this one does have, you know, it does have the plot, but then it's also very focused on these characters and building them out and their relationships with each other, these different friendships, and as I said, romantic relationships, parent-child relationships. We see these characters for so long that at times it did feel like, okay, this is dragging, but as I said, by the end it's so worth it. It made me cry. It's very emotional, it's very beautiful and sad at times, and yeah, really heartbreaking, also heartwarming. Like, it just had so many things going for it that I really want to recommend it because I personally have not heard people review it yet on BookTube, but I want to put it on the map for you. I want to recommend it. It's a really good one, and it's a bit different than what I typically read. Yeah, overall I think I had a pretty good reading month in terms of like ratings. I do wish I could have read a little bit more, but you know what, it was a good mix, as I said at the beginning, of romance, contemporary, like mystery, nonfiction. So there you go. So feel free to leave me a comment if you'd like, if you have any thoughts about these books, if I've convinced you to read any of them. And yeah, just thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you'll subscribe for future wrap-ups and other bookish videos. I will catch you guys next time in my next video. Bye.